My uncle didn't hit me the night everything changed. He didn't need to. He just stood in the doorway of my bedroom at 2 in the morning, holding a folder of documents I wasn't supposed to have found, and said very quietly, "You're going to regret this, Nora." I was 28 years old. I had a nursing license, a 6-year-old I was raising alone, and a bedroom in my dead mother's house that still smelled like her lavender hand cream. I had exactly $43 in my checking account, and a secret I'd been sitting on for 3 months, too afraid to do anything with it. That night, I finally did something with it. My mother died 14 months before that moment. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, diagnosed in March, gone by October. She went fast, which the hospice nurse said was a mercy. I didn't feel merciful. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under my entire life. Her name was Patricia. She was 57 years old. She had a garden full of black-eyed Susans and a subscription to 3 different puzzle magazines. And she made the best chicken and dumplings in Harlan County, Kentucky. She also had a will. A real one, drafted by an attorney in Lexington, notarized, filed. She left her house, her savings account, just under $90,000, and a small parcel of land on the east side of the county to me and my daughter, Lily. My uncle became the executor. I want you to understand something about my uncle before I tell you what he did. He wasn't the kind of man who yelled. He wasn't the kind of man who made scenes. He coached Little League for 15 years. He sang in the church choir. He drove his wife, my Aunt Bev, to every single one of her chemo appointments without complaint. People in our town talked about him the way people talk about oak trees: solid, permanent, something you could lean against. I trusted him completely. For the first 2 months after my mother's funeral, I was too deep underwater to ask questions. I was working double shifts at the hospital, running on gas station coffee and grief, coming home to a first grader who kept asking when Grandma was coming back. The estate paperwork arrived in thick envelopes I stacked on the kitchen counter and told myself I'd deal with later. Later came on a Tuesday in February when I finally sat down with all of it spread across the kitchen table. Lily was asleep. The heat wasn't working right, and I had a blanket around my shoulders and a highlighter in my hand. The numbers didn't add up. The savings account had been nearly $90,000. The attorney's documentation confirmed it, but the estate accounting my uncle had filed showed a distribution of just under $41,000. The difference, $48,000, was itemized as estate of administration expenses and property maintenance costs. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I called the attorney. She was careful on the phone. Professional. But she told me that $48,000 in administrative expenses for an estate this size was, in her words, unusual. I started digging. I'm a nurse. I spend my working life reading charts and looking for things that don't belong. A number that doesn't fit. A symptom that contradicts the diagnosis. You learn to trust that feeling in your gut that says something is wrong. I trusted it now. Over the next 3 weeks, between shifts, after Lily went to bed, I pulled records. I filed a request for the estate's bank statements. I drove to Lexington and sat in the probate court clerk's office for 4 hours. I found invoices. Invoices my uncle had submitted for reimbursement for work done on my mother's property. Landscaping, roof repair, HVAC maintenance. The amounts were enormous and the vendors didn't exist. I typed every company name into the Kentucky Secretary of State's business registry. Nothing. Searched them online. Nothing. There were names attached to a P.O. box in Lexington that traced back to a mail forwarding service. Shell companies. My uncle didn't build my dead mother's estate through shell companies he controlled. I printed everything. I put it in a manila folder. I hid the folder inside a hollowed-out copy of a nursing pharmacology textbook on my shelf, the kind no one ever touches. I should have gone to the attorney that week, I know that now, but I kept thinking about Aunt Bev, who was still finishing her own cancer treatment. I kept thinking about the Little League trophies in his garage. I kept thinking about the way he had stood at my mother's graveside with his hat in his hands and how real the grief on his face had looked. I kept asking myself if I was wrong. If I'd missed something. Then came the night he appeared in my doorway. I don't know how he found out I'd been to the probate court. Maybe someone told him. Maybe he had a contact in the clerk's office. Small counties work that way. But he knew, and he stood in my doorway at 2 in the morning, and he told me I was going to regret it, and the look on his face, calm, certain, almost gentle, was more frightening than any amount of yelling would have been. He said if I took this further, he would make sure the right people heard about the insurance billing discrepancy from my last hospital job. There had been an investigation 3 years ago, a miscoded claim that a supervisor had flagged. It was a clerical error, resolved, no action taken, but he knew about it, and in his mouth, it would become something else entirely. He said, "You're a single mother with a history. Nobody's going to take your word over mine." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. After he left, I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a long time. Lily was asleep down the hall. The folder was still in the pharmacology book. I thought about what he'd said and I tried to find the lie in it. The part where he was wrong, I couldn't. The next morning I called in sick to work. I drove Lily to her school, watched her disappear inside with her backpack shaped like a ladybug, and then I sat in the school parking lot for 20 minutes trying to breathe. I didn't know where to go. The attorney's office felt dangerous now. I didn't know what my uncle had already told her, or whether their professional relationship meant she'd be on his side. The local police were people who'd known my uncle for 30 years. The county prosecutor had coached on his little league team. I was a woman with a manila folder full of financial documents and a threat hanging over my head, and I couldn't see a single door that wasn't already painted shut. I drove to the public library. Not for any particular reason. It was warm, it was quiet, it wasn't home. I sat at a table in the back corner near the large print section, and I opened my laptop and I stared at it. The woman who eventually sat down across from me didn't ask if I was okay. I'm glad she didn't. If she had, I think I would have said I was fine and closed my laptop and driven home and done nothing. Instead, she sat down, pulled a reference book from the shelf behind her, and read in silence. She was older, maybe early 60s, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a blazer that was slightly too formal for a Tuesday morning in a small-town library. After about 15 minutes, she looked up. "You've been staring at a blank document for 12 minutes, she said. Not unkind, just factual. I laughed, which surprised me. Is it that obvious? Only because I do the same thing when I'm trying to figure out how to start something difficult. I don't know why I told her. Maybe because she was a stranger. Maybe because I was exhausted and scared and hadn't slept more than 4 hours. Maybe because the probate court documents were still open in another tab, and I was already past the point of pretending everything was fine. I told her about my mother, about the will, about the shell companies, about my uncle appearing in my doorway the night before. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. "Yes. All of it. The original estate filing, the bank statements, the business registry searches." "Yes." She looked at me carefully. Then she reached into her blazer pocket and took out a business card. She slid it across the table face down, which I thought was strange. I flipped it over. I had to read it twice. Her name was Helen Voss. The title beneath it read, Chief Inspector, Kentucky Department of Financial Institutions, Financial Crimes Division, retired. I looked up at her. "I'm in town visiting my sister," she said, and there was something almost wry in her expression. "I come to this library every morning when I visit because the coffee at her house is terrible." I didn't know what to say. "The type of fraud you're describing," she said, keeping her voice level, "is not unusual in probate cases. It's also not difficult to prosecute when the documentation is solid." She paused. "Is your documentation solid?" "Yes," I said. "I'm a nurse. I know how to read numbers." Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile. Something more like recognition. "Good," she said. "Then the question isn't whether you have a case. The question is whether you're willing to make one." I looked down at the business card. The coffee maker in the library's small lounge was gurgling in the background. Someone's phone buzzed. The large print section smelled like old paper and heating vents. "He threatened me," I said. "He said he'd go after my nursing license." "They always do," she said simply. The threat is designed to make you feel like you're the one with something to lose. You're not. He is. She spent the next 2 hours sitting across from me at that library table, walking me through exactly what to do. Not vague advice, a specific sequence of steps. File a complaint with the Kentucky Bar Association regarding the attorney, as a protective measure. Submit a formal complaint to the State Probate Fraud Unit. She wrote down the exact name and direct phone number of the investigator who handled Harlan County cases. Gather a witness statement from the probate court clerk who had already seen my records request, and document the threat. Write it down, date it, sign it, email it to myself and to a trusted person so it had a timestamp. The mistake most people make, she said, is they wait for someone to rescue them. Nobody's coming to rescue you, but the law is on your side if you go to it. Before we left, she asked me one more question. Did I have somewhere safe to stay? I thought about my uncle standing in my doorway. About the fact that my daughter's bedroom was down the hall. I don't know, I said honestly. She wrote another number on the back of her card. This is my cell. If anything happens before you get in front of the right people, you call me. The weeks that followed were the most frightening and the most focused of my life. I followed Helen's instructions exactly. I filed the probate fraud complaint on a Thursday. By the following Monday, I had a case number and the name of the investigator assigned to it. I drove to Lexington to meet with a different attorney, one who specialized in probate litigation and had no connection to my uncle or our county. I brought the folder. I brought the printed bank statements. I brought the Secretary of State searches. I sat across from her while she read, and I watched her expression change as she turned pages. How did you find all of this? She asked. I'm a nurse, I said. I read charts. She looked up and smiled. Okay, let's build this. My uncle found out about the investigator within the week. Word travels fast in small counties. He called me, not to yell. That wasn't his way. His voice on the phone was the same gentle, reasonable tone he used for everything, the same voice he'd used in the doorway. Nora, he said, you're making a mistake. You're hurting the family over a misunderstanding. I had been coached, by that point, by my attorney. I had my phone on speaker and was recording the call, which was legal in Kentucky under one-party consent laws. Tell me about the misunderstanding, I said. He paused. A brief one, but I noticed it. The expenses were legitimate. I have records. Then you should share them with the investigator, I said. That would clear everything up quickly. Another pause. Longer. I'm trying to give you a chance to stop this before it goes somewhere we can't come back from. I thought about my mother's house, about Lily asking when Grandma was coming back, about $48,000 that should have gone to a little girl's future and had instead gone to shell companies. I think we passed that point a while ago, I said, and I ended the call. He changed tactics after that. He went to my aunt first. Aunt Bev, who was still tired from chemo and didn't need any of this. He told her I was having some kind of breakdown, that grief had made me paranoid, that he was worried about me. I know this because Aunt Bev called me herself, crying, asking me to please just talk to him, please just let it go. She couldn't handle any more stress right now. That was the hardest phone call of the entire ordeal. Harder than anything that came later. I loved my aunt. She was sick. She was scared. And she was being used. I told her the truth as clearly and calmly as I could. I didn't ask her to choose. I told her what I had found, and I told her that I was sorry she was caught in the middle of it, and that I hoped when it was all over she would understand why I couldn't let it go. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Your mother worked her whole life for what she left you." "Yes," I said. "She did." "Okay," Aunt Bev said quietly. And then she asked if Lily was doing well in school. My uncle's last move was the one I had been dreading. He called the hospital where I worked and requested a meeting with the HR director, during which he raised, in vague and concerned terms, questions about my mental stability and the billing investigation from 3 years ago. I found out about it because my charge nurse, a woman I had worked beside for 4 years, called me at home that night. "I don't know what your uncle told them," she said. But I want you to know that I was in that meeting and I said exactly what happened 3 years ago, which was nothing. And I'd put that in writing if you need me to." She did. I added her statement to the folder. By the time the formal hearing date was set, we had 7 months of documentation. My attorney had filed suit for the full amount of the missing estate funds, plus damages. The state investigator had independently confirmed 3 of the shell companies traced to accounts my uncle controlled. My uncle's own attorney had quietly suggested a settlement conversation, which my attorney had declined. The hearing was held in Lexington in a federal administrative building that smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air. I wore my good blazer, navy blue, the one I wore to job interviews, and I sat beside my attorney and I did not look at my uncle across the aisle until I had to. When I finally did look at him, what I saw surprised me. He looked old. Not tired, genuinely aged, in a way he hadn't been a year ago. The easy confidence that had always made him seem larger than the room was gone. He sat with his shoulders slightly forward and his eyes on the table in front of him, and he looked like exactly what he was. A man who had done something wrong and gotten caught, and who could no longer make himself believe otherwise. His attorney made the arguments you'd expect. The expenses were legitimate but poorly documented. The invoices were real, but the vendors had since dissolved. My mental state and my professional history were raised, briefly, before my attorney objected and the examiner sustained it. Then it was my turn. I had been told to bring documentation and answer questions. That's it. Let the paper make the argument. I had been told this repeatedly. By my attorney, by Helen Voss, by the charge nurse who'd sat with me the night before over the phone reminding me to sleep. I brought the documentation. I answered the questions. My voice didn't shake. My uncle's attorney, on cross, tried the paranoia angle one more time. He asks gently whether I had been under significant stress in the months following my mother's death. Whether grief sometimes causes people to see patterns that aren't there. I looked at him. "I'm a registered nurse," I said. "I spend every shift looking for things that don't belong. A medication that shouldn't be in a chart. A number that's outside the normal range. A pattern that indicates something has gone wrong." I paused. $48,000 in administrative fees paid to companies that don't exist falls outside the normal range. The examiner looked at my uncle. My uncle looked at the table. That afternoon, Aunt Bev walked in. I didn't know she was coming. Nobody had told me. She appeared at the back of the room during the afternoon session and sat down in the public gallery. And when I noticed her, I felt my chest seize, because I still didn't know, even then, which way she would go. She wasn't called as a witness, but when it was over, when the examiner had recessed for deliberation and everyone was gathering their papers, my uncle walked past her on his way to the hallway. He stopped and said something to her, quiet, and reached for her arm. She stepped back. It was a small movement, 2 inches, maybe, but in that room, it was enormous. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 7 months. The ruling came back 12 days later. My uncle was found liable for fraudulent misappropriation of estate funds. The full $48,000 was ordered returned to the estate, plus statutory interest. The matter was referred to the county attorney's office for potential criminal charges when my attorney called to tell me. I was in the hospital parking lot, still in my scrubs, having just ended a 10-hour shift. I sat in my car and looked at the windshield and felt nothing for a long moment. Not triumph, not relief, just a bone-deep quiet that I didn't have a word for. Then I drove to Lily's after-school program and picked her up, and she ran to me across the parking lot with her arms out and her backpack flapping, and she said, "Mom, I made a clay turtle in art. Do you want to see it?" And I said, "I want to see it more than anything." And I meant it. Helen Voss sent me a text that evening. Just 3 words. "You did it." I'd kept her number in my phone all those months. Had thought about calling it more times than I could count. When my uncle left that voicemail, when my aunt cried on the phone, when the HR director had called me in for what turned out to be a routine conversation that still made my hands shake. I never called. I figured she'd given me what I needed and the rest was mine to do. But I texted back. I had a good teacher. She replied with a single emoji. A gavel. My uncle did not go to prison. The county attorney's office reviewed the referral and ultimately declined to prosecute, citing the civil resolution and his lack of prior record. I was angry about that for a while. I'm less angry now, though I haven't fully made peace with it. What I've made peace with is this. My mother worked for 30 years as a bookkeeper at a lumber company in Harlan. She took her lunch in a brown bag. She drove the same car for 11 years. She grew black-eyed Susans in her yard because they came back every year without needing to be replanted. She saved money the way people save money when they grew up without it. Carefully, patiently, like it might disappear if they weren't watching. She saved it for Lily. She saved it for me. And when someone tried to take it, I went and got it back. That feels like enough. Most days, it feels like more than enough. 6 months after the ruling, I transferred to a hospital in Lexington. More opportunities, better hours, closer to the court system if anything with the estate came up again. Lily started 2nd grade and made friends with a girl across the street and came home one afternoon talking about getting a hamster, which I said we'd discuss, which means we'll probably have a hamster by spring. I called Helen Voss the week before my transfer to tell her we were moving. She said she was glad. She asked if I'd thought about what I wanted to do with the estate funds once they cleared. I had. I'd thought about it a lot. 1/3 of it is going into a 529 account for Lily's education. 1/3 into an emergency fund, the kind I'd spent my entire adult life not having. And the last 1/3 I put toward the down payment on a small house in a neighborhood 30 minutes outside the city, with a yard big enough for a garden. I planted black-eyed Susans along the back fence in September, the kind that come back every year without needing to be replanted. Some mornings, standing at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee while Lily is still asleep, I look out at them and I think about my mother, about what she built and what she left and what almost happened to it. I think about a Tuesday morning in a small-town library and a woman in a blazer who didn't ask if I was okay. I think about how close I came to saying nothing, doing nothing, letting fear make the decision for me. I didn't let it, and if you're reading this, or listening, wherever you are, and you're sitting with a folder you're too afraid to open, a number that doesn't add up, a person who told you that you have something to lose. You do have something to lose. But so do they, and the law doesn't care how many years someone coached Little League. Get the documentation. Find the right person. Make the case. Your mother worked too hard for you to do anything else. I think about the Tuesday I sat in that library a lot. Not the ruling, not the check, not the moment his attorney suggested a settlement. That Tuesday morning when I almost closed the laptop and drove home and did nothing. That's the moment I come back to, because nothing my uncle did happened overnight. He made a series of small choices over a long time, choices that depended on one thing being true, that I would be too afraid, too tired, too alone to look closely at the numbers. He counted on my grief making me slow. He counted on his reputation making me doubt myself. He counted on the gap between what he had and what I had. His connections, his history in that county, his 30 years of Little League and church choir, to be wide enough that I'd never try to cross it. He was almost right. What he didn't account for was that I'd spent 6 years as a nurse reading charts, and a nurse who reads charts learns very early that the most dangerous thing you can do is look at something that doesn't fit and decide it's probably nothing. People get hurt that way. People die that way. You learn to trust the thing in your gut that says, look again. That instinct is not something that turns off when you leave the hospital. It's just who you become. I've thought a lot about what got me through those 7 months. Part of it was Helen. Right place, right morning, right blazer. But Helen didn't find the show companies. Helen didn't spend 3 weeks pulling probate records after 12-hour shifts. Helen didn't sit on the phone with Aunt Bev while she cried and still tell her the truth anyway. That was me. And I don't say that to take anything away from Helen, because her clarity in that library genuinely changed the course of things. I say it because I spent a long time attributing my survival to luck, to the accident of a retired investigator needing better coffee than her sisters. And I've stopped doing that. Luck gave me Helen. Knowing what to do with her was something else. What I've come to believe is that the three things that actually moved the situation were not dramatic. They were quiet. The first was that I knew right from wrong clearly enough to act on it, even when acting on it was dangerous. Even when my uncle was standing in my doorway at 2 in the morning, making it very clear that knowing right from wrong was going to cost me something. The second was that I had the kind of mind that could do the work, not genius, not special. Just trained to pay attention, to read carefully, to not accept a number that doesn't fit. And the third was that I kept going. Not bravely, not without fear, but one step at a time, one phone call, one document, one day. Those three things are not gifts, they are not luck. They are habits, and habits can be built. My mother built them quietly for 30 years. Brown bag lunches, same car for 11 years. Black-eyed Susans because they came back without being replanted. She was teaching me something the whole time, and I almost let someone take the result of that teaching away. Lily brought home her clay turtle from art class the day after the ruling. It's sitting on the windowsill above my kitchen sink. It's a little lopsided, and one of its legs is shorter than the others, and I love it more than almost anything in that house. Some things are yours, go get them back,